The Song and the Mast. On Odysseus, enchantment, and the disciplines by which a man survives what calls him by name, by Elias Winter. April 17th, 2026. Read by an automated voice. 1. The ship nearing the song. There are dangers that announce themselves with claws. There are others that come not as violence, but as invitation. The first kind arouses vigilance. The second asks for recognition. The first strikes the body. The second asks for consent. It is the second kind that more often destroys a man. The sea is already full of memory when the ship nears the place. Odysseus does not arrive at the Sirens innocent. He comes warned. Before the water narrows into that fatal region, before the strange meadow appears, before the voices begin their impossible work, another woman has already spoken. The knowledge has been given in advance. This matters. In the older wisdom of the world, survival often begins not in the moment of danger, but in the dignity of prior warning. Circe had told him what lies ahead. Not only the sirens, but the logic of them. Not only that they sing, but that whoever hears them and follows is lost. Not only that the song is beautiful, but that it is fatal precisely because beauty is not incidental to the danger. It is the medium of the danger. Bones lie there, she says. Men did not perish because they were stupid. They perished because the thing that called them was shaped to their hunger. By then, Odysseus already knows something of women who delay, soften, capture, and disclose. He has known a different island first, Caia, where Circe lives among wolves made tame, where smoke rises from her house, where his men, weary from the sea, entered at the invitation of a voice. They found food, sweetness, welcome. They found the oldest trap under its most civilized form, hospitality emptied of innocence. She mixed the meal with her drugs, struck them with her wand, and the men became swine, not dead, lowered, not annihilated, reduced, appetite without rank, bodily life without speech, fit for men. One escaped. Odysseus was warned. Hermes met him on the road with the herb that would keep enchantment from entering too deeply. He went to Circe's house not untempted, but prepared. He withstood the spell, forced the oath, entered her bed only after surviving her danger, and remained there a year. A year. Even rescue, once accomplished, becomes delay. Even victory asks whether a man still remembers home. It is this woman, dangerous first and wise afterward, who tells him about the next thing. So now the ship approaches. The sea does not look like a sermon. There is no thunderbolt, no righteous fire, just a place in the water toward which other men have steered and not returned. Odysseus does not tell his crew everything, or rather he tells them what is needed. He takes wax and softens it. He stops their ears so that they will hear nothing. He himself asks to hear. This too matters. He does not choose innocence. He does not choose not to know. He chooses instead the more difficult relation, to hear and not obey. Then he gives the command that makes the whole story endure. Tie me to the mast, not loosely, not ceremonially. Bind me. If I beg, do not release me. If I command you, bind me more tightly. If I rage, treat my speech in that hour not as law, but as evidence of danger. In that sentence lies an entire philosophy of the divided self, though the philosophy comes later. For now, it is enough to see the image. A king instructing his men that his future words, uttered under enchantment, are not to be trusted over the prior command. The ship goes on. Then the song begins. In Homer, the sirens do not howl. They do not bark out threat like crude monsters. They call him by name. They flatter. They promise. They present themselves not as a pleasure against truth, but as the deeper truth itself. Come here, Odysseus. No one has passed without listening. No one has failed to leave wiser. The temptation is perfect, because it does not sound like self-destruction. It sounds like fulfillment. It sounds like knowledge. It sounds like the final answer to a hunger that had not yet found its language. And he wants it. This must be said plainly. He does not hear them and laugh. He does not hear them and discover himself immune. He strains against the ropes. He commands his men to untie him. He is not serene. He is not above the thing. His body leans toward the song. His speech turns against his own earlier wisdom. If they heard him, they might obey. But they do not hear him. Wax has sealed their ears. They row on. Some accounts say they bind him tighter. They honor the truth of the earlier man against the pleading of the later one. That is how he passes, not by ceasing to want, not by proving the song false in the moment, not by becoming morally pure. He survives because he arranged in advance that wanting would not be sovereign. The ropes do not remove desire. They prevent desire from steering. Soon the sound weakens. The ship clears the range. The men remove the wax. The knots are loosened. The danger is not refuted. It is behind them. They do not win by argument. They win by endurance and form. Something in this ancient scene remains unbearably exact. The ship on dark water. The warning received from another island. The body bound to a mast. The future self anticipated and mistrusted. The voice that does not order, but invites. The men rowing on while the leader begs to be released. It is one of the most enduring images in the literature of the West, because it understands something humiliating and therefore permanent. There are states in which the self that desires is not the self that should decide. The sea has always known this before philosophy did. 2. The women of delay, the creatures of appetite. Greek myth is more exact than modern simplification often allows. It does not merely give us temptation as a single undifferentiated force. It offers instead a taxonomy. Not every seduction has the same structure. Not every delay works the same corruption. Not every danger destroys by the same means. The Odyssey is in part a catalogue of derailments, a sequence of forms by which a man is drawn away from home. Circe is not the Sirens. Calypso is not Circe. The Lotus Eaters are not the Sirens either. To read them as interchangeable symbols of bad desire is to miss the precision of the poem. Homeric imagination is not lazy. It knows that oblivion, enchantment, luxury, and fatal allure are different species of danger. Circe belongs to the order of transformation. She is divine or semi-divine, daughter of Helios in the old genealogies, a woman of remote island power, herbs, drugs, voice, and shape-shifting force. She is what the world becomes when beauty, softness, and appetite form an alliance against human vigilance. Her house is not a battlefield. It is more dangerous than that. It is civilized. There is food, song, woven cloth, a woman at the loom. The men do not charge in as conquerors. They enter as guests. That is why the metamorphosis into swine is so severe. They are not killed. They are lowered. The symbol is not childish insult, but anthropological judgment. Unguarded appetite reduces the human being below his own proper form. The swine has body, hunger, immediacy, sensation. What it lacks is remembered dignity. To become an animal in myth is not simply to change species. It is to lose rank within the order of being. The Sirens belong to another order. They do not transform, they call. Their danger is not degradation through indulgent enchantment, but destruction through fatal allure. Ancient accounts differ about their exact parentage, as myths often do. They are associated with river gods, with muses, with chthonic or liminal powers, with the border between song and death. What matters is not genealogical certainty, but symbolic function. They are voices at the edge of passage. They promise what the soul most wants to hear, that this time the thing before you is not merely pleasant, but ultimate. Their danger lies in the convergence of beauty and certainty. Circe softens a man into appetite. The sirens persuade him towards self-destruction under the sign of completion. Calypso is yet another figure entirely. She does not degrade like Circe, nor kill like the sirens. She delays through abundance. With her, the threat is not collapse, but suspension. Odysseus lives with her in erotic and immortal ease. He is offered not degradation, but indefinite postponement of mortality and return. Calypso's island represents a danger subtler than vice. The possibility that a man may remain indefinitely in a form of pleasure that slowly abolishes destiny. It is not sordid. It is luxurious. That is why it is dangerous. Some lives are lost, not through catastrophe, but through the endless deferment of what they were for. Then there are the lotus eaters, perhaps the quietest, and therefore one of the most terrifying episodes in the poem. The lotus does not claw, drug into animal form, or sing from a deadly meadow. It merely induces forgetfulness. Those who eat no longer want to continue. They do not become monsters. They become willing to remain. The peril here is painless oblivion. Home ceases to exert force. Memory loses its heat. Purpose dissolves not in agony, but in softness. Odysseus must drag his men back to the ships. If Circe represents degradation and the sirens represent fatal attraction, the lotus represents the narcotic disappearance of destination itself. What then of Hermes? He appears as helper where enchantment has already become active. Messenger, trickster, guide across thresholds. He is one of the gods who mediates between human peril and divine knowledge. He does not hate Circe. Greek myth is not organized by such modern moral simplifications. Hermes recognizes a pattern and gives an instrument, the herb that will render Odysseus resistant to the spell. The intervention is not innocence, but aid. One survives certain dangers, not by never having needed help, but by accepting a gift from beyond one's own unaided resources. And Odysseus himself must be placed correctly within this symbolic order. He is not an ascetic saint moving through corruption untouched. He is beautiful in the way epic heroes are often beautiful. Not merely physically impressive, but marked by vitality, intelligence, speech, charisma, and stature. Yet none of this grants immunity. Greek epic has no interest in flattering beauty with invulnerability. Odysseus desires, delays, lies, grieves, longs, calculates, yields where he can, resists where he must. He is not the hero of purity. He is the hero of cunning endurance under mixed motives. This makes him more useful to thought than a blameless figure would be. He is not temptation's opposite. He is the man who must learn its varieties while still wishing for some of what it offers. This is why the Odyssey remains so alive. It does not depict evil as a single monstrous thing. It shows instead how the soul can be taken by different forms of interruption. Some dangers lower a man. Some seduce him to destruction. Some suspend him in erotic comfort. Some erase the very memory of return. Greek myth gives not a sermon, but a map. And that map turns out to be less ancient than we flatter ourselves into thinking. 3. The philosophy of the mast. The central brilliance of the Sirens episode is not merely narrative, it is anthropological. It presumes a divided human being. Odysseus before the Sirens and Odysseus under their song are not equal legislators of the self. The earlier man knows what the later man will become. The later man, once enthralled, believes with total sincerity that the ropes should be untied. The whole force of the scene depends on the humiliating truth that sincerity and wisdom can part company. One may want something wholeheartedly and still be wrong in exactly the proportion of one's felt certainty. This is what the mast signifies. It is easy to praise freedom in the abstract. More difficult is the recognition that freedom sometimes requires voluntary limitation. The modern imagination, sentimental about spontaneity and suspicious of discipline, often imagines liberty as absence of restraint. Homer knows better. There are conditions under which the unbound self is not free, but captured. In such moments, binding is not the opposite of liberty. It is its instrument. The ropes do not insult Odysseus's dignity. They preserve it against the state in which he would trade it away. A human being is not unitary. This is one of the oldest truths and one of the most repeatedly forgotten. Plato will later give the soul its divided structure. Augustine will describe the will at war with itself. The Christian tradition will speak of flesh and spirit, not in contempt for the body, but in recognition that desire can become disordered and turn against what one knows to be good. Nietzsche will ask what forms of self-overcoming are possible without resentment. Modern psychology will break the person into drives, defenses, trauma, conditioning, compulsion. None of this is alien to the old scene on the water. The categories differ. The fracture remains. Pre-commitment is one answer to fracture. The word is modern. The insight is old. A man makes a decision now about what shall govern him later, when later no longer thinks clearly. He arranges his future in such a way that his temporary self cannot undo what his deeper or earlier self knows. This is not hypocrisy. It is hierarchy. Not every voice within a man deserves equal authority. The self in enchantment is not false, but it is narrowed. It speaks from within a field of compression. It sees one thing enlarged and all costs hidden. Such a self may feel urgent, but urgency is not sovereignty. This is why desire and truth are not identical. A culture trained to treat authenticity as the supreme virtue repeatedly confuses intensity with legitimacy. I feel it strongly, therefore it is real. It is real, yes. But reality of feeling is not proof of the goodness of its object. The Sirens' song is real. Odysseus's yearning is real. The destruction toward which both point is also real. The task of thought is not to deny desire, but to refuse its promotion into final authority. The Mast also reveals something about time. The self that binds is not simply stronger than the self that strains. It is earlier. Wisdom here is chronological as much as moral. The earlier self has access to information that the later self, in the grip of the song, cannot use. The later self is not better because it is more immediate. Proximity to temptation does not generate clarity. It generates distortion. Thus one survives by honoring memory against immediacy. A man gives the future back to the part of him not yet under enchantment. This gives the story a metaphysical dimension. Ithaca is not merely a geographic destination. It is the name of an order. Home means continuity, identity, duty, fidelity, the place toward which one has been called, the form of life to which one belongs, even when storm and delay have intervened. Against this, the Sirens offer not merely pleasure, but an alternate telos, come here instead. Let this be the finality. Let the journey end here, not in fulfillment, but in fascination. The mast is therefore not only discipline, it is orientation. A man binds himself because he knows where he is trying to go. There is, too, an element of shame in this wisdom, and that shame is cleansing. Odysseus must admit that his future self cannot be trusted. Not, might not, cannot. He must place the authority to refuse him in the hands of others. There is no grandiosity in this. It is a rebuke to the fantasy of total self-sufficiency. One of the humiliations proper to maturity is the recognition that there are circumstances in which one survives only if others disobey one's plea. This is why the crew matters. The men with wax in their ears are not merely attendants in a picturesque myth. They are the communal form of fidelity. They hold the line not through insight, but through obedience to an earlier order. They need not understand the song. They need only row. In a civilization that romanticizes interiority, this is easy to underestimate. Yet much of what preserves a life is not ecstasy of understanding, but the boring faithfulness of execution. The philosophy of the mast is therefore not heroic in the vulgar sense. It does not exalt a man who conquers by strength alone. It describes instead a creature humble enough to anticipate his own collapse, disciplined enough to prepare for it, and fortunate enough to be surrounded by forms and persons that still hold when his own speech becomes treacherous. Such a philosophy offends several modern vanities at once. It offends the cult of spontaneity by insisting that not every impulse deserves enactment. It offends the cult of self-trust by suggesting that trust must be selective and earned. It offends the cult of feeling by refusing to make desire self-justifying. And it offends the cult of autonomy by showing that dependence, under certain conditions, is not weakness, but the last defense of a truer freedom. A man is often freest not when he can do whatever he wants, but when he has already decided which of his wants shall never be allowed to rule. That is the philosophy concealed in the image of a body bound to wood, while the sea carries him through the range of voices that know his name. 4. The Sirens of Chemistry. Myth survives because it can migrate. The sirens do not remain on a Bronze Age sea. They alter medium. They enter the city. They enter electricity, screens, powders, bottles, feed algorithms, pharmacies, bars, fantasies, and the body's own reward circuits. They do not cease to be mythic because they become chemical. They become more exact. Addiction is not identical to the sirens, but it belongs to the same moral weather. A modern craving is one of the places where the old structure appears under altered conditions. The thing calls by name. It addresses the wound precisely. It does not present itself as destruction. It presents itself as relief, coherence, completion, pleasure, cessation of pain, restoration of the self to itself. This is why the language of argument often fails in the moment of temptation. One is no longer debating propositions. One is listening to a song. The acute brilliance of the sirens as an image for addiction lies here. The danger is not ignorance. Odysseus knows. He is not misinformed. He does not need another pamphlet. He does not lack reasons. What he lacks, in the moment the song takes hold, is the capacity to let reasons govern without prior structure. This is one of the cruel truths of compulsion. The person under its pressure may remember everything and still feel everything bending toward the one prohibited thing as if all reality had narrowed to a point. Modern chemistry sharpens this. Some substances do not merely tempt the imagination. They enter the machinery of reward and recalibrate value. They make alternate goods appear dim, abstract, laughable, insufficient. The song becomes biochemical. It is not only heard, it is felt as necessity. That state need not be permanent to be devastating. For hours, it may narrow the field so completely that the body, memory, and imagination all collaborate in the lie. Nothing else matters. Nothing else will do. Nothing else has ever truly satisfied. The danger of reducing addiction to bad choices is not merely moral stupidity, it is conceptual failure. The addict often retains enough consciousness to know he is being lied to, and not enough freedom to make that knowledge operative. The lie does not replace awareness, it outruns it. The song does not erase memory, it subordinates memory to craving. That is why shame alone never saves. Shame may intensify secrecy, self-hatred, or desperation, but it does not build a mast. What then are the ropes in modern life? They are whatever a person arranges in advance so that the later, narrowed self cannot easily govern. Deleted numbers, blocked contacts, closed apps, cash limits, no bars on certain nights, telling another person the window of danger before it arrives, sleeping instead of bargaining, showering instead of scrolling, letting another human know the hour in which the song usually begins, putting the phone in another room, accepting that one is not at his wisest after the third drink, after the erotic disappointment, after the lonely Friday, after the week of depletion, after the fight, after the memory that enters with its old voltage. The ropes are not romantic. They are often boring, inelegant, humbling. So are ship masts. The wax matters too. Some things must not be heard at all. There are lives in which one can admire the beauty of a certain danger from a philosophical distance and not go near it. There are other lives in which proximity is already too much. One person may pass by a bar, an app, a dealer's neighborhood, a flirtatious exchange, a bottle in the cabinet, without the song becoming active. Another may not. Wisdom is not proved by pretending these differences do not exist. It is proved by knowing which sounds one can survive hearing and which must be muted before they enter. This is where the distinction between Circe and the Sirens returns with force. Not every danger in addiction has the same structure. Some dangers are Circe-like. They soften vigilance. They lower form. They make a man more animal, less sovereign. The long scrolling, the sexualized fantasy, the room of ambient validation, the atmosphere in which appetite grows while judgment grows dim. These may not kill immediately, but they prepare the body and mind for what comes next. They are houses where men are fed and slowly reduced. Other dangers are siren-like. They become lethal once pursued. The particular chemical, the call, the dealer, the ritual of procurement, the sequence that has already ended in wreckage many times. These are not environments of gradual lowering, but songs that, once followed, direct the ship toward ruin. To confuse the two is costly. If one treats sirens as though they were merely Circe, one negotiates with what must be passed by. If one treats every Circe-like softening as though it were already final destruction, one may lose the subtlety needed to understand how relapse sequences are built. Some things are not the act itself. They are the lowering of form that makes the act easier. One needs different kinds of discipline for each. Addiction also reveals something further about modernity. The ancient song came from a meadow. The modern one comes pre-tailored. It knows your data, your loneliness, your hour of weakness, your erotic imagination, your most effective fantasies of repair. It can arrive through commerce, through entertainment, through pharmacology, through platforms designed to keep desire activated and interrupted, but never fulfilled. A civilization that monetizes compulsion manufactures sirens and then sells ropes at retail as lifestyle products. It is not enough to moralize about individual weakness in such a world. One must see the architecture. Still, one truth remains stubbornly personal. A man does not relapse because he has no values. He relapses because, under the song, he temporarily loses access to the scale on which his values can still govern. The work of recovery, therefore, cannot consist only in noble sentiments. It must consist in arrangements. The right text sent before evening, the trainer in the morning, the sponsor called before the body is already moving toward the door, the food eaten, the sleep taken, the app removed, the room left, the one friend told the dangerous hour, the self addressed in advance, not after the ship has already turned. The mistake is always the same: to wait until enchantment to invent principles. Odysseus does not improvise the ropes while listening. He wins, if that is the word, before the song begins. So too with recovery. The acute window is not the time to discover one's philosophy. It is the time to be held by one. The chemistry may be modern. The dignity required to survive it is very old. 5. Friday evening or the modern Mast. It is Friday, and the day has already gone wrong in the body before anything outwardly dramatic has happened. The hour itself is a danger. The week has thinned him. Work has ended not with satisfaction, but with the collapse of structure. The afternoon light has that indifferent quality by which a city seems to say, "Now do whatever you want, and let whatever follows belong to no one." A craving had already come earlier, hard and humiliating, with the brutal honesty of chemistry. Nothing sounds good except the thing that destroys me. He had lain down. He had endured. He had gone out to dinner instead. There had been contact, warmth, recognition, the strange pleasure of being expected somewhere, a man across the table, good food, conversation, a hope, quiet but bodily, that the evening might continue in a more tender register. The possibility of a hand lingering longer, of another room, of that soft human suspension in which the body ceases for a moment to feel like an isolated republic. But the dinner ended. The other man had somewhere to go. The city folded back into separateness. He came home. This is one of the least dramatic and most dangerous moments in a life. Nothing has happened that could justify catastrophe. No great betrayal, no death, no final expulsion, just the ordinary drop after contact. The door closes. The apartment receives him without witness. What had briefly seemed possible withdraws into the category of not tonight. The body, already primed by earlier craving, begins to reinterpret this small emotional fact as emergency. There were drinks in him already, enough to soften the first wall between desire and action. Not enough for open collapse, which makes the state more deceptive. 2 espresso martinis and a red wine. Enough alcohol to lower the gate. Enough caffeine to keep the mind lit and the body falsely available to continuation. He could still narrate himself as in control. This is one of the old lies. What did he want? Not, in the deepest sense, a drink. The fantasy assembled itself with more precision than that. A tank top, earbuds, music that makes the body feel framed from within. A cocktail in a gay-friendly room. The possibility of being seen. Not perfectly thin, but more muscle now. Some work visible on the arms and shoulders, the body becoming not ideal, but at least less abandoned. The fantasy was theatrical in the modest modern sense. No epic drama, just atmosphere, visibility. A room in which loneliness could be converted for an hour into style. There are evenings on which this might be merely human. Evenings on which a man can go out, take the drink, enjoy the room, come home, sleep, rise. But he is not an abstract man in an abstract evening. He is a particular man on a particular Friday, after a particular afternoon of cravings, after a particular dinner that almost became tenderness, and did not, with a particular history in which alcohol and night and loneliness and erotic activation have already formed recognizable alliances. And there is Saturday morning, not as moral ideal, but as fact. 10 a.m. A trainer, a friend, a man whose name carries in it the shape of another kind of pull. Not a saint, not a saviour, not the answer to love. Something more ordinary and therefore more useful. Appointment, embodiment, accountability, the body under daylight rather than neon. A crush, perhaps. A Greek god in the limited urban sense. Muscles, charm, the pleasure of being seen by someone beautiful enough to awaken effort. But more importantly, a fixed point in time. Morning. That is what matters. Morning, waiting at the far side of the night, like Ithaca in miniature. He has been reading Homer, or rather, Homer has found the evening before the evening found him. The old scene is now available in consciousness. The sea, the warning, the wax, the mast. The voice that names a man and offers him precisely what will ruin him. He sees something with painful clarity. If the argument begins now, at this hour, in this body, after these drinks, then the argument is already contaminated. The issue is not whether the bar is evil, not whether a tank top is vain, not whether music and glances are sinful. The issue is that tonight he is not dealing with isolated objects, he is dealing with sequence. This is how a life is usually lost, not by choosing destruction in the abstract, but by repeatedly misnaming sequence as freedom. One more drink, one more room, one more round of validation, one more flirtation, one more hour before sleep. The lie is always modular. No one says to himself, I will choose the whole wreckage. He chooses the first turn and trusts the rest to remain negotiable. But the Mast has entered the room. A man need not become ancient to use ancient wisdom. He need only become honest. He recognizes that there is a self in him who should not be allowed to drive after a certain hour, under certain conditions, with certain combinations of loneliness and alcohol, and thwarted tenderness already in the bloodstream. This recognition is humiliating. It is also clean. So the modern ropes are assembled. No more apps tonight. No bar. No rideshare summoned in the heat of desire and defended later as spontaneity. Water, food, home clothes, a shower. The phone farther away. The body not displayed but contained. Music, perhaps, but inside the room rather than under the lights of other men's glances. The fantasy is not denied the dignity of having been real. It is simply refused the authority to direct the night. He thinks of the old distinction. Some dangers are Circe, the room of softening, the atmosphere that lowers form and makes appetite feel normal. Some are Sirens, the sequence that, if pursued, will not stop where it claims it will. Tonight the bar is not just a bar. It is part of a song. The question is not whether he has the right to pleasure. The question is whether he will misrecognize enchantment as relief. There is nothing triumphant in staying home. That is important. He does not become instantly serene. The apartment does not fill with grace merely because he has chosen not to go out again. The body remains noisy. The drop after dinner still hurts. He is still a man who wanted to be held and was not held. The tank top still exists. The mirror does not become kind. The loneliness is not cancelled by a reference to Homer. This, too, the story understands. Odysseus did not stop wanting the Sirens while he heard them. He survived wanting them. So the night is survived. Morning comes not as redemption, but as sequence fulfilled. The alarm, the transit, the gym, the trainer. Brad, perhaps, in the ordinary splendor of muscles, schedule, casual attention, the body already inside its discipline. Not the answer to love, not the cure for addiction, not the completion promised by the song. Just the next right thing on the far side of a night that might have gone elsewhere. The crush remains. The asymmetry remains. The strange old hunger to be chosen remains. But the body lifts. Breath returns. Sweat clarifies. A man who might have given the night away instead arrives intact enough to train. This is not a conversion story. It is a story about form. A civilization that flatters crisis and miracle will find such endings unimpressive. No wreckage, no grand salvation. Only a man who, after 3 drinks and disappointment and the ache for visibility, remained inside the ropes long enough to let the night pass. Only a Saturday morning preserved. Only a body still available to work. Only an old poem having done, across millennia, the quiet work of preventing one more surrender. But perhaps this is already a great deal. The Sirens are not defeated once and for all. The sea does not cease. Friday returns. Loneliness returns. Chemistry returns. Beauty returns under dangerous forms. So too must the mast. So too the warning. So too the prior agreement by which one's self protects another from the hour in which desire speaks more persuasively than truth. The free man is often imagined as the one who can go anywhere, untied, answerable only to his own immediate wish. Homer offers a harder dignity. The freest man, on certain nights, is the one who refuses to untie himself. Elias Winter, author of Language Matters, a space for reflection on language, power, and decline. Thanks for reading Language Matters. Subscribe for free to receive new posts and support my work.